Chapter 1. Ashton. When the dark settled in, Ashton rose from his bed with a gasp. He sensed trouble. It must be Dakota, he thought. He never experienced a feeling like that, as if a dosage of fresh human blood pumping through his veins woke him from a dead sleep. Rushing to dress, his thoughts were on her. He knew how futile it was to ask Dakota to refrain from looking for Paige until he could join her. That damned existence of only walking during the night troubled him forever. Discover a cure were his thoughts, but he would put his experiments aside to find the woman he loved. Nevertheless, he needed a safeguard to counteract Morgan and his tricks. Ashton prayed he wasn't too late when he reached Dakota. That thought gave him shivers. Finally, he found a human female devoted to him, and one who understood what she signed up for by falling in love with him, but had she? Had she known all the truth about Ashton Mieres? No one knew the whole truth about any individual, especially one as secretive as Ashton. Also, he wondered if she knew the entire story about his life, and would she still be devoted to him when the truth came out? After dressing in his black shirt and slacks, Ashton rang for his servant. Usually, Walker would have his clothing waiting when he woke. Reaching for the bell to summon someone, his call went unanswered. When he couldn't get a response, he left his room and strode down the corridor to the great room overlooking the city. Ashton stared out at the city lights, distracted for the moment with thoughts about Dakota. He wondered whether she acted foolish by seeking out Morgan, thinking she could reason with him. Then his thoughts focused. Where had Walker gone? He felt a presence and turned with a quick flash. What are you doing here? His eyes narrowed, and he gazed at the figure standing before him. I came to reason with you. Morgan sent me to persuade you that it will mean your death if you come for the girl. There is no need for you to die. The voice low and passionate and sexy. Does he have Dakota? The vampire tilted her head, but didn't answer. She swirled around and wrapped her arms around Ashton. He didn't blink or warn her to stay away. She crossed his boundaries. And being too close to him, she clearly overstepped her limits. Instead, he pushed her arms down. She leaned and her cold lips grazed his neck. He felt nothing. Empty. Only the warmth of Dakota's lips could make his cock quiver. The young female vampire stood tall and erect like a model. She had been once. In her other life, but she gave that up to serve Morgan and herself. Still in love with Ashton and not getting enough attention because of his work, she sought to make him jealous and try to get him to marry her, but that was never his focus. He had to discover a cure for the vampire curse, and didn't have time for a life of any kind. Much less one with a human female he had discarded because she slept with his brother. Ashton met Elizabeth in Europe. In Rome, to be precise. Elizabeth then a model in Italy on a night photo shoot, and Ashton in Rome searching through the libraries to get some idea of how to proceed with his experiments, and to hire the many doctors he would need at his research hospital. He came across Elizabeth by accident. Leaving the library, he strolled to the Fountain of Trevi in Rome. Standing in the shadows, their eyes met, and the photo shoot was cut short. She returned to his hotel room with him, and he would fuck her all night until that morning before sending her away each morning. And she came back night after night, and then she didn't leave. Ashton's mind wandered to that time, and he didn't want to think of Elizabeth in that way anymore. He didn't want to believe he made a mistake in allowing her into his life. He didn't want to think about how he felt about her, and that she could share a life with him. Elizabeth. If Morgan thinks you can persuade me to forget about Dakota, then you and he are wrong. Elizabeth strolled close to Ashton, and he pulled away and hissed at her, then retracting his incisors. He hadn't shown those strong, sharp teeth to anyone in years. You still have the smell of that human on your body, she said. I can give you a different smell. One you will enjoy. Remember when I was your concubine, your sub, and you were my master? I knew you were what I sought, someone I could serve and love. You serve a different master now. You were never someone I could love. I tried, but we were too different. Also, you were too needy. But it was you I loved and you I wanted, and you were the needy one, she said, caressing his face. Ashton's eyes closed and he didn't pull away this time. Elizabeth knew how to bring him into her world. She was the first to introduce him to the idea of dom and sub. It was natural for Ashton to fall into that lifestyle because he was the ultimate master, the ultimate alpha male vampire, but consumed with the idea that to live a better life without hunting and killing for human blood, he would need to find a cure for his sickness. He considered it a disease. Elizabeth saw it as a gift. When Elizabeth touched Ashton's face, she propelled his thoughts back to Rome. In that darkened hotel, in that dim-lit room where they lay, where she took out her black studded collar and placed it around her neck and said, "Command me and I will obey you. Whatever you want, I will do." Elizabeth served as a sub for a wealthy and much-respected politician in Rome's government, and lived with him after turning 18. With the help of his friends in all aspects of Rome's high society, he arranged for her to live her dreams of becoming a fashion model, even gracing the covers of Vogue magazine throughout Europe and the US. Moreover, soon reaching the heights of the highest-paid model in the world. With money but no power, she met Ashton, and he divulged to her and demonstrated that he was a vampire. It was then she knew he possessed the power she craved. When Elizabeth suggested that Ashton make her his sub, and she will be his slave, he thought this was what he needed to relieve the personal pressures he carried for most of the century. Never taking a woman because he didn't have the time to devote to her, and having previously years before having his wife die of old age, made him almost a recluse. Ashton responded to Elizabeth's suggestions favorably. "I can only see you at night. I will come to you, and I expect you to be waiting for me. You will have no other master but me," he said to her in that darkened hotel room in Rome. Getting close to his discovery, Ashton didn't want any distractions. He thought Elizabeth was his answer to his lonely nights and days. He released his controlled sexual stress because Elizabeth enjoyed him fucking her, after whipping her ass every night. She lived for the pain and arousal it brought her. Ashton didn't realize until it was too late that he had fallen into her lifestyle, and it would be difficult or impossible to extract himself from the pleasure of the kind of sex she provided. He became like a drug addict who enjoyed the high, because he so loved it. He needed the relief she delivered by agreeing to fuck him every night. Now Ashton could concentrate on his work. He was content then. Breaking through Elizabeth's seduction, Ashton's eyes opened wide and then narrowed. He peered at Elizabeth. "You have wasted your time if you think your charms still hold sway over me. There was a time when I would give my life for you, but you ended that when you took Morgan as your master. Tell Morgan that I'm coming for him. Will you destroy me if I try to prevent you?" She stood facing him, almost as tall as Ashton, and equally as beautiful, with long flowing blonde hair, steel blue eyes, and luminous skin. Elizabeth raised her cold white hand, and Ashton took it, holding it at the wrist. "Why don't you respond to me anymore? Why do you drive me away from you?" Ashton dropped her hand and strode away from her. "I warned you that if you let Morgan change you, we could never be together again." He looked away when speaking to her. "But I wanted to be like you. I wanted to be with you forever." Their eyes met. "You can still have me," she said. "Remember how we loved each other. Remember how aroused you became when I first placed your hard cock in my mouth and you watched your cum drip from my lips. You were like a young boy who'd never been fucked. Remember how you made love to me afterward. You fucked me from behind. In both my holes, as if you didn't know the difference. However, you knew, and I never complained. I was your sub. I knew you were rough and strong, but I didn't know that you were a vampire until the accident." Ashton would never forget that night as much as he tried. Elizabeth sauntered behind Ashton to convince him that some of this was his fault. She placed her hand to his face. You were too physically powerful for me. We were making love every night, and my body was breaking down. And because you were my master, I didn't dare say a word. I had to do something because you never would. You enjoyed me. You can't deny that. Ashton's eyes closed and he leaned his face to her hand. And then something broke her spell. The thought of Dakota when she lay in his arms when he made love to her the first time. Dakota so innocent and so trusting. Grabbing Elizabeth's hand, Ashton said, "You were once what I desired when you were human. I told you that I was trying to find a cure for this vampire curse, but you didn't believe me. You allowed my brother to come between us and to sleep with you, and change you into what you are now. A soulless female, a sexual slave to him and your desires." "And I desire you," she whispered. Ashton turned away from her, walked to the window and gazed out. "Leave me, Elizabeth. I have things to do." "How can I leave you when you were my only yearning? You belong to me and no other." "No. You belong to me to do as I commanded," Ashton said. "These were your rules. You came to me with master and sub and bondage, and I accepted what you wanted and what you were with your prior master. I gave up everything to sleep at the foot of your chamber day after day. Then when you left me at night, I stayed waiting for you. I kneeled and called you master at the clubs we visited. I let you parade me around naked, like a dog on a leash." Elizabeth said to Ashton, her voice begging for understanding. "This is what you wanted, and I thought you were what I wanted, but I know the difference now, and I can't be anyone's master any longer. I have a bond with Dakota. A relationship without master and sub, without pain with arousal. Even if I wanted you again, our relationship is no longer in balance. We are both dominant. Two dominants can't be together. You need to find a sub." "I have many subs," Elizabeth said, her brow furrowing and eyes glowing with resentment. "But I want to be yours again." Her voice dropped to a low moan, as if reliving the thought of how hard Ashton fucked her in the past. "I need a human. I want to be devoted to her, the way you were once devoted to me. I need an equal relationship, and I found that with Dakota." "You will be sorry," Elizabeth said to Ashton. She smiled and then a small laugh escaped. "That's what you said when you slept with my brother, knowing what he would do to you. I blamed myself, but no more. I found the one who doesn't make me feel hollow inside. Dakota fills me with what you and Morgan took from me." Ashton stared blankly at Elizabeth, as if looking through her. As if she was a window, and he saw the terrible things they did together. "When that little mortal of yours discovers the truth about us, she won't be so forgiving." Elizabeth hissed and then turned from Ashton, blew him a kiss and disappeared. Chapter 2. Dakota. "You will have to drag him to your cave. You don't look strong enough to carry him." Dakota stood looking up at the shifter. The shifter's body erect from all fours, and when she took a better look at him when he raised his head, he stood over 6 feet, long legs and huge muscular arms. No longer resembling a giant wolf, but a man. A handsome man. A tall, hairy, sexy man with a chiseled face and deep-set brown eyes. The fading light passed over his face, showing his well-developed cheekbones. Dakota's breath hitched. He held his head high, his wide, confident shoulders set back. The alpha of his pack, away from his pack, and out here alone, Dakota thought. She read about werewolves and shifters in romance novels, but never thought they existed. She never knew there were vampires until now. She could throw her beliefs out the window for what they were worth. When he shifted, it had been painful for a young werewolf. With practice, he got the hang of it, and he knew that soon it would come as natural as eating. His appearance changed dramatically looking down on her as she faced the stream to button her blouse. Now she could gawk at him standing naked before her. The shifter didn't think anything of it. This was common in his pack. but from his teachings, by the ruling alphas, he knew enough to hide his appearance from humans, but for some reason he didn't. Dakota turned away and closed her eyes. A naked man made her nervous, and to be around a male so endowed and so masculine touched her deep in her core. She could count the times seeing a man naked. Only a second time, she remembered admiring a nude male and comparing the differences in their genitals. Both males' penis huge and impressive made her want more. Then she thought of Ashton. The sun would set in a matter of minutes, and he would realize that she just disappeared. Her heart quickened as she gazed on this shifter's face and body. His massive rippling muscles equaling Ashton. She had to close her eyes again. She didn't like the feeling she got from seeing him. A fiery sensation rippled through her. The reflection in the water, an image of his powerful thighs and ass when he reached to retrieve his pants. The picture of his hard ass sent hungry desire spiraling through her before he stepped into his pants and pulled them up. There wasn't a zipper, but a large cord that tied the pants around his small waist. He turned to face Dakota. She opened her eyes and spun around. The man with a youthful face stood before her. His broad shoulders stretched endlessly. His chest bare and his feet bare. When Dakota looked up at him, he cut a dominant figure. She became speechless. "Where is your friend?" he asked. "I think he's over there." She pointed as if he understood her mumbling, and the wave of her hand made no sense. The werewolf couldn't find Thomas with that one gesture, she thought. But she lacked the words to explain. That had been a first for her. Dakota speechless? "I'll get him," the werewolf said. He raised his chin as if sniffing something in the air. "Stay here. The cave is only a few feet away. Follow the sound of the waterfall, if I'm not back in half an hour. Keep listening for the running water, and you'll find the cave. It will be dark soon. My scent will prevent the vampires from locating you. If I don't return, then that will mean that something has happened to me. But don't be fearful. It will take a lot to kill me." He smiled at her with uneven white brilliant teeth. "What's your name?" she said, touching his arm as he turned to leave. He looked down at her small hand on his massive arm. "Ronan. My name is Ronan." And he took off in a sprint, dashing through the tall grass and scurrying behind tall green trees. In a matter of seconds, Dakota could no longer see him. Dakota sat near the stream, staring into the water. She didn't know what to make of the shifter. She had never seen one before, but then she had never seen a vampire before either. She waited a few minutes, but thought it better to head in the direction of the cave, because night was approaching. Standing and thinking about Ashton, the shifter, Paige, and Thomas, she forgot that she had been hungry and left the fish on the bank. It didn't take but a few steps, but it felt like she had been walking all day when she approached the mouth of the cave. Looking to her left and then her right, she entered cautiously. She didn't know Ronan, and perhaps he was an emissary of Morgan, and she didn't want to be caught and brought to him. As she stumbled around the dark cave, she looked at the straw and dried leaves piled up for a bed. That must be where Ronan slept. Taking a few confused steps, she dropped down on the bed of leaves. Before falling asleep, she questioned everything that had happened today. Why was Ronan in this cave alone without his pack? She knew something about wolves. She knew they traveled in packs, unless the pack ostracized him for some reason. As she kicked aside sticks, she realized some were bones. Thank God they weren't human bones. "Men," she said. "They don't know how to act civilized without a woman around," she mumbled. The bones left over from animals, tossed around after Ronan ate the flesh. She rose from the soft leaves and ambled along, reaching down picking up bones from around the bed. She threw the bones on the outside, calling herself cleaning up the cave. She murmured, "At least he's a meat eater and not one of those blood-sucking fiends." Standing still looking around, she realized what she had said, and she couldn't move from that one spot. She loved that blood-sucking fiend called a vampire. At least he tried to pretend he wasn't one. But who knows what he had done in his past life? She thought. Where the fuck are you, Ashton? Her voice loud and echoing in the cave, showing how desperate and terrified she had become. Hearing her voice, she placed her hand over her mouth and glanced around, hoping no one had heard her. But who would? Dakota crouched down and decided to lay on the bed of grass and leaves. Exhausted from the climb, or the bed appeared more comfortable than she thought, she closed her eyes and lay there. When she opened her eyes again, squatting looking at her sat Ronan. His dark eyes were staring at her, as if she was a curious animal he had hunted and caught before he ate it. Jumping to her feet, she felt dizzy and fell into Ronan's arms instead. Looking up in Ronan's dark brown eyes and not having enough strength to resist his hold, she resigned herself to be cradled in his arms. Dakota said, "Where's my friend Thomas?" Her voice rang of softness and helplessness. More weak than helpless. "I'm sorry, Dakota, I didn't get to him in time." Ronan's eyes showed his powerlessness to help Dakota when she needed him. "What do you mean?" Her eyes locked on his. "You know what I mean. He's gone." She climbed out of his lap and stood on wobbly legs as she tried to get to the opening of the cave. She had slept all night into the day, and it was dark again. "Why didn't you wake me?" She glanced over and saw an indentation where Ronan had slept. It was near her. "Couldn't you find another place to lie down?" "When I came in, you were shivering, and I didn't know what to do. I changed and became a werewolf, and my fur shielded you from the cold. I tried to wake you at first, but you wouldn't move. You must have been exhausted, and I decided to let you sleep." "You're a werewolf?" "What did you think I was?" Ronan asked. "A wolf that changes or shifts into another body. A fox or sheep one day and another animal the next." Ronan laughed out loud, his white teeth gleaming from the moonlight entering the cave. "I'm a shifter, but I can only shift into a human or wolf, and I doubt I would be able to become a sheep or fox. The fox is a shifter too. The sheep, I don't think so. It's not in their nature. I've never heard of sheep shifters or met any. With my species, we call ourselves werewolves." "What do you think happened to my friend?" Dakota questioned, after she got control of her emotions. She pulled herself away from Ronan. "Do you think you can handle what I'm about to tell you?" "I can handle anything, after walking miles up a mountain and being chased by creepy murderous vampires." Ronan raised one eyebrow. Dakota thought it made him look sexy, but she couldn't feel that way now. It was probably her hormones playing tricks on her. She missed Ashton. She needed him to hold her now that she was frightened out of her wits. "Your friend was taken by the vampires. They will probably use him as a food supply for the younger ones, because their appetites are ravenous. That's why they come to this island once a year. To teach their young how to hunt." Dakota felt her legs weakening, and she swayed and fell into the shifter's arms once more. She composed herself after looking into his flushed, handsome face. She caught her breath and pulled away from his arms. Looking at him, she asked the question she had wanted to ask earlier. "Why are you here? Why are you in this cave?" "Clearly you could escape," Dakota said, to keep tears from welling up in her eyes and to prevent herself from thinking about Thomas. It was all her fault. She was the one who brought him along, and she will never forgive herself. "I'm the protector of my pack. The alpha males take turns leading the vampires away from our pack and keep our hunting grounds clear of the venom that the vampires have in their glands. They can bite a deer and poison my entire pack if we're not careful. If they venture outside their compound, then I warn my pack and we hunt them. This is the time of the year our females give birth. The betas will provide security if one or more of the alphas fall by the hands of the vampires." "Do you have a female with child?" "I've just become a yearling and haven't taken a female yet." "If you mean child, no, I have no children. They're considered children if our female is human." Dakota thought that was interesting. If you mean pup, which is what we refer to as our offspring with another, we're female. Not yet. He glanced at Dakota with a mysterious smile. That's why they sent me alone, no female and no pups. I volunteered to go. The rest of the pack protects the females and their pups if the vampires venture off their territory to hunt one of us. How many do you have in your pack? 2 alphas and 6 beta males. The rest are females. I don't consider the females alphas unless they have more than 1 litter of pups. That figures, Dakota said under her breath, but Ronan heard her and stared at her. How old would you say you are in human years? Dakota asked him. She asked because she thought it cool. She never thought she would meet a werewolf. 20. 20. I'm 19. You and I are almost the same age. Dakota's voice warmed, thinking Ronan was almost like her. At least in years. Ronan smiled at her, making her feel safe. We are, aren't we? It will be interesting when I bring you to the pack, Ronan said. You're not bringing me anywhere. I have to get off this island. She stood and paced, wringing her hands over each other, then rubbing her arms as if something had bitten her. Not until the vampires leave. And the last of them, Morgan, I think that's what they call him, resides here most of the time. Or at least he's back and forth. It's not him we have to worry about because he can't handle a young werewolf like myself alone, and the pack would kill him if he stayed too long here, and he knows it. Dakota listened, attentively, never giving away that she knew this vampire and why she showed up on the island. Ronan hadn't gotten around to asking her why she had come here. He had assumed that they were hikers on a day trip and gotten lost. Dakota couldn't help think about how Ronan knew so much about Morgan. You know my story, but why are you here, Dakota? Finally, he got around to asking the question she didn't want to answer. You aren't wearing the traditional gowns of the young females who will allow these creatures to seduce them. And you don't look like a tourist. It's my friend. Her name is Paige. I came here to try to find her. I'm afraid you're too late. I don't think Paige will be alive, well, not in the way you hope. I've never known any humans to leave this island as humans. You may be the only one left that is human. What about you? I'm a werewolf. I'm half human and half wolf. The vampires don't worry about us. As long as we leave them alone, they will not bother us. But if we harbor a female that Morgan is fascinated with, then the entire pack is at risk. That's why we stay to ourselves. I'll leave when the sun rises in the morning. I don't want to cause you any problems, Dakota said to Ronan. I don't want you to go. It's lonely here and you can't leave. How are you going to get off this island without a boat? Dakota didn't tell Ronan that Elliot told her about a skiff. You must be hungry. I brought you fresh fish. He handed it to her. She salivated over the smell of fresh fish and reached and tasted it and inhaled and exhaled. Then she smiled back at Ronan. He took her smile as a thank you. He placed another piece on a large leaf and handed it to Dakota. She picked it up with her hands and hunched over it, and gobbled it down as Ronan watched her with a smile. Looking up at him, she said, Aren't you going to eat? Fish is not my favorite food. I'm strictly into red meat. Ronan liked that Dakota appreciated what he had brought her. He wanted a female but never felt attracted to one of the were-females, even though several were promised to him on his return to the pack. After Dakota ate, she still felt tired, as if she couldn't move one step. She placed the empty leaf near her, laid back against the soft bed of leaves, and closed her eyes. Ronan sat watching her as she slept. He saw her move about trying to get comfortable, mumble something unintelligible, and trembling in her sleep from the chill of the cave. He listened carefully and heard her nightmares. When she called out Ashton, he reached for her, pulled her close, and placed her in his arms. She nudged her head against his broad chest as he comforted her and warmed her as she slept.